Guess what, good viewer? I have, well, I lied to you in one of the recent videos, and it's time to come clean, and it has everything to do with distilling on grain or not. How's it going, chasers? I hope you're having a kick-ass week. I'm Jesse, this is Still It, and these are two different samples that are identical in every way that I could conceive to make them, or attempt at least to make them identical, other than one was distilled on grain and one was not. And I actually did this in the middle of one of the recent videos that was relatively popular when I filled the barrel with 100% corn. I even put clips of this extra sample into that video a couple of times, and I don't think anyone actually noticed it. Let's back up here a little bit and explain for those of you that didn't get to seeing that video. A little while ago, I filled a barrel up with 100% corn mash, and I did some yeast testing along the way to see different, how different yeasts would affect the final product, basically. What I did is another distillation with the really clear stuff before I did the yeast distillation. So it wasn't, it's not really lying. I guess it's kind of like purposefully deceiving in a non-lying, I don't know. This is what I did anyway. So the first thing I did when that fermenter stopped fermenting was to skim off the very clear liquid right off the top and bang that into the still. No corn, no nothing, just the clearest liquid I could get. And I did have to press a little bit of corn there, so there was a very clear liquid and there was a little bit of, like pressed, sort of slightly murky wash as well, but no solids at all. The other side is exactly the same thing, except I put a bunch of solid, like chunky corn from the fermenter in there as well. This is the sample that you saw in that video. This is the new sample that's clean. So everything I said in that video was true. I just omitted the fact that this exists. So before I actually taste this, let's talk about some of the theory and the ideas behind why this can have a fairly profound effect, or theoretically can have a profound effect on the outcome of a product. And then once we've done that, I'm going to taste both of these and tell you, to the best of my ability, whether I am picking up any of what that theory is putting down. So, oh, and by the way, guys, literally, as this was sitting and chilling and aging a little bit for me to do this, Matt Drew from Single Malt Matters put out a podcast literally talking about this exact same thing with two different professional distillers getting their take on the why-fors and how-tos of all of it. And it is absolutely amazing. Link down below. Listen to the damn thing if you're interested in this at all. I mean, watch the rest of this video and then click on it so you don't destroy my YouTube metrics. Whatever. Do what you want to do. You're going to anyway. So here's the thing, guys. There's a bunch of stuff in corn that it doesn't want to dissolve into water. It's not water soluble, and water is not soluble into it. It's protein and oils, mostly. I mean, think about it. You grab a steak, you throw it into water, it doesn't dissolve like a sugar cube would. You grab a knob of butter, you throw it into water, it doesn't dissolve. And there's a lot of proteins and oils in the corn that we can't dissolve into water as well. Now, as you raise the temperature to mash and to boil, some of those things, it's not that they become soluble, it's that they can be slightly more persuaded for a small amount of them to be soluble. Sure, that is definitely a thing. But I guess the idea is if you just throw the stuff in the still, all of that becomes irrelevant. It doesn't need to be soluble in water because it's in the still. And as long as the distilling process is going to volatilize some of it, it's going to make it through the still and become congeners in the finished product. And this traditionally is one of the huge differences between Scotch single malt and American bourbon. So Scotch single malt and I guess single malt as a wider category around the world is almost exclusively entirely fermented and distilled off grain. So all of those oils and those proteins that we were talking about do not make it into even the fermenter, let alone the still. So a lot of the American sort of style whiskeys like bourbon are the opposite. All of that stuff goes into the fermenter, all of that stuff goes into the still, So a lot more of those compounds have the ability to make it over into the finished product. And once again, go and listen to that podcast with Matt, because he goes into this a whole lot more and sort of talks about the whole idea of hammer mills and where they come into this, you know, obliterating the grain rather than just crushing it a little bit like a roller mill, and then column stills versus pot stills, and you know, how all of this comes together. That's all a little bit past what I'm planning on talking about here today, but if you want to go more into this, I'm all for it. And after, spoiler alert, after tasting this, I want to test this more as well, and you know, really see how this can be used as a flavor lever, something that we can push and pull to decide exactly the sort of product we want to create. But basically the general idea is distilling on grain, big flavor. So use a column still to kind of tame that dirty great big flavor. Double pot stilling alters the wash less than a dirty great big column still. So start with something that is a little bit more refined and a little bit less sort of wild to get a prettier flavor out of a double pot still. Cool. But of course, I did put some slightly murky wort in there, which would have contained some of this stuff as well. So anyway, my point being is that these two samples are a lot closer together. They're a lot more similar than they could be versus separating the grain at mash, lautering, and distilling fully on grain. Those two samples, if/when, I'm hoping we do that experiment here, those two samples will be even further apart. So if I can taste the difference here, you get the point, right? Anyway, enough of that. Let's get on to this. This is what I tasted in the last video. That, with an extra week on it, is getting so much better. So much better. There's so much more fruitiness, more complexity, and it's mellowed a lot too from memory. Starting to get slightly tannic because there's a buttload of wood in there. And spoiler alert, these things were force aged. But the thing that I'm really interested here is kind of the bready, corny, thick, oily feel that's coming through on this one. And yes, it is 100% there. And it makes me wonder if I have been a little cavalier about not thinking about this in the past. Do you remember last time I talked about this barrel, saying that there was almost a stock-like presence to this? There was something almost umami-ish, and it was kind of like vegetable stock. This is probably exactly what I was experiencing. But we need to say a huge thank you to the Patreons. Thank you so much, Patreons, for everything you do. And I promise you, 100%, those vouchers for the Into the AM people that got them would have definitely been sent by now. So make sure you check your message thingy on Patreon. Cool? All right. Anyway, back to this. All right. The clean version. Once again, exactly the same as this, just had all of the solids filtered out of it before it went into the still. Dude, the night and day, completely different. This is pretty and exact and like precise. And the biggest thing that's coming through is actually the yeast character on the nose. Yeah, all of the esters that came through in this that I liked from this yeast in that past experiment are really brought to the fore on this, because there isn't that grungy, bready, stock-like. Dude, you know what it tastes like? Funnily enough, which makes a whole lot of sense, or smells like, was tamales. Not obviously the salsa or the, you know, any of the protein that you put in it, the steak or pork or whatever. But yeah, the outside of the tamale. Yum. This, on the other hand, is like Scotch. Bright, light. Oh, and when I say Scotch, I'm thinking, you know, like a Glenfiddich or something like that. We're not talking Islay here. I know that's a huge category, and I'm being imprecise in my descriptors. Bad Jesse. Completely different. Wow. Spoiler alert, I actually did taste this a couple of days ago, but I didn't do it side by side. And I thought there was a difference, but I wanted to wait and see side by side. And yeah, there 100% is. Wow. Okay, so I want to take a step back here. And I want to say that I'm not putting judgment in terms of good and bad on either of these things. It's the difference that's interesting, right? It is just another artistic choice. How do you want to play this? How do you want to go about it? What do you want to bring to your final spirit? This is grungy and like angry is not the right word. It's like an emo kid that takes himself way too seriously. Oh god, dark and deep and funky and I don't know, man. It's like a grumpy teenager. And this is like much more refined, much more precise, much more delicate and dainty. And neither of those things are good or bad. Right now, if I was going to drink one, I would drink this 100% all day long, because this doesn't have all of the other things that it would need to back it up. We just made the video a couple of days ago on the sherry finish, right? So this would be probably a better platform to sherry finish than this, I think, because the sherry would just take this over or not even be there. This has like a big, bready, tamale-like backbone to sit on it. This would probably, I'm guessing, also too, benefit from a lot more age. But there you go, guys. This is something that I've wanted to try for a while because I've heard rumors about it. I've heard people talking about it. In my mind, confirmed. 100% confirmed. Same mash, same, like literally the same ferment. Came out of the same fermenter, put into the still with exactly, like as best as I could, the exact same distillation. And these two products, they taste like, they're not even siblings. They're maybe second cousins. Yeah, if that. That's so crazy. And like I said, we could take this process even further to experimenting with testing it all the way back at taking the grain out pre-fermentation. And then, letting all the chunky stuff settle out to the bottom before putting it into the still, so on and so forth. Yeah, good test. I'm glad I did this. We've got a lot to experiment with in the future. If you've got suggestions on what those experiments should be, chuck them down below. If you've done experiments like this and you want to share your results and your findings, chuck them in the description down below. If you enjoyed the video, hit me with a thumbs up. That helps out more than you could probably know. You can give it a dislike if you want, but silly YouTube took those away. So, I mean, whatever. So ridiculous. Hit subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll catch you next time, guys. Keep on chasing the craft. See ya.